But we have upon us another fluttering of debutantes, the start of another society season of coming-out dances, with its inanities, its ridiculous extravagances, its social disasters, and tiny triumphs.
A deb, otherwise known as a debutante, refers to a young woman typically of wealthy background, who is at an age where they can be presented to society. They can be around the ages of 16 to 18, though in modern times that age has risen to 18 to 22. These young women experience afternoon teas, small dances, etiquette lessons, and most notably, a debutante ball. Hi, I'm Hannah Elisha, and welcome to my channel. If you're into everything from the roaring 20s to the grungy 90s, you're in the right place. Here we dive into fashion, lifestyle, pop culture, and all the fascinating parts your history teacher never taught you. So if you're into that kind of thing, make sure to subscribe and join me as we travel back in time to the 20th century debutante era. In this video, we'll be focusing on debutantes from the 1900s, so if you're wanting a Bridgerton or a more modern recap, you can check out the description below, where I provide some great videos from other channels that talk more specifically about those topics. How did you become a deb? Throughout time, historically, debs have all been from wealthy aristocratic backgrounds, typically from old money wanting to maintain their status in their family, or by new money wanting to elevate their status. And while most were rich, there were some organizations that through them all you had to do was apply and see if you made the cut.
Last time I interviewed you, Miss Huxtable, you were the Deb of the Year. Now, what does it take to be a successful Deb?
Well, I think first of all you need a father who's got money, and a mother who's got a lot of willpower and stamina, and on the side maybe some publicity.
Before debuting, while you may think the debut season begins and ends with an elaborate ball, it isn't quite like that. Most debs in the 20s to the 60s would have attended etiquette lessons or even go as far as going to a finishing school. A finishing school is a private school for young women that would have taught them etiquette and cultural studies, typically would be enrolled before their debut to society. And like what you might think, yes, most of these girls were from upper class or aristocratic families, but sometimes weekly lessons would be free through local clubs or churches. They would teach you how to sit properly, how to converse, and most importantly, how to present yourself with skincare techniques and basic grooming hygiene. Most courses could meet weekly for a few weeks or even for a few months. While these schools, otherwise known as charm schools, may seem old-fashioned and are definitely something I wouldn't really consider for myself, there were positive factors that a lot of students were wanting to get out of it, and that was self-confidence.
I don't know that I was doing anything wrong really, but I was just unsure of myself. I had lost my self-confidence.
Yeah, concentrate on all your good points and bring them out, and somehow you feel more confident. It gives you an inner sort of glow.
I'd let myself go. I wasn't doing anything for myself. I was devoting myself to my home child and forgetting that I was a person, an individual.
And if something helps your self-confidence grow, I say do that. By the 1960s, though, these finishing schools were on the way out. The events. There are many events a deb can experience during her coming out season. Some events are afternoon tea with dancing, small dances, small tea, and most importantly, a debutante ball. These events would begin in the springtime, typically May, and generally last until the end of the summer, typically August. In London, 1962, it was normal for a deb to go to 5 different dances a week.
In my day, one went to a few parties given by friends and it snowballed. The whole thing was much cozier. Now, if you're really going to get caught up in debauchery, it's a full-time occupation. You get simply snowballed into a tremendous organization, which is very hard to get out of. You can't really be a deb in a small way nowadays. You either have to give a tremendous ball and do the whole thing or not at all.
In places like the United Kingdom, some girls would stay in houses all together and attend these events all throughout the summer, making it quite exhausting, quite expensive, and rather exciting. Ultimately, these events would be held for women to meet husbands. And often a successful season meant an engagement ring at the end of it. A debutante ball, the more lavish and prestigious type event you could throw or attend. The large event would be held in a ballroom, inviting a wide range of guests, available men, other debs, family and friends, and as well as professional acquaintances. Your own family may throw a debutante ball, and it would be specifically maybe for you, or you could attend a debutante ball thrown by a club or society.
Queen Charlotte's ball on May the 1st, when Deb's curtsy to a giant wedding cake instead of to the Queen, is now the highlight. For although that most eligible of bachelors, the Duke of Kent, married a girl who'd never been a Deb, the season, with its vast expense, quaint rules and eligible lists, continues under its own momentum, mingling the offspring of dukes, Americans, politicians and businessmen, and bringing rich profits to photographers, musicians, dressmakers, finishing schools, florists, caterers, publicity men, and blue-haired Knightsbridge widows with contacts.
Unlike modern debutante balls you see currently, these dresses were historically pale in color or just pure white. Not too elaborate, but should still suggest youthfulness through delicate fabrics like lace or gauze that could have finer details with crystals or appliques. The International Debutante Ball, which began in 1954, hosted presidential and world leader granddaughters. They had a certain rules a deb must follow pertaining to their outfits, such as all dresses must be floor length. If the dress is strapless or cap sleeve, they must wear white long gloves. But if the dress has longer sleeves, you can wear short gloves. But the gloves must always be pure white. Most, as you can see, opted with the strapless option and long gloves as opposed to long sleeved dresses. While at the ball, it was important for each debutante to greet each guest, either besides their mother, another deb, or a hostess. This is called a receiving line and was one of the most important parts of the event. At most events, a deb would either be paired with a young man or you would have chosen someone yourself. They would be similar in age. This would be called your escort. He would accompany her during the receiving line, dinner, and dances. While escorts were more about social status than romance, in some cases, debs would be engaged by the end of the season with their escort. And during the 20th century, that would mean her season was a success.
Well, it made me meet lots of people, make lots of friends, and ultimately I met my husband through a friend that I made during the season. So it did me a lot of good.
I also forgot to mention that before you would meet up with your escort, your father would escort you. And if not your father, maybe your uncle or your grandfather. Dancing during a ball was of the utmost importance, and knowing how to dance to certain styles was key, such as the waltz or a previously choreographed dance. But by dinner, the debs are finally able to sit down at a table and enjoy a bit of relaxation. At the table could be fellow debs and their escorts, typically serving appetizers, a soup, a main course, with a salad for a cleansing platter, and finishing with a dessert and coffee. The more popular you are, the more types of these events you would attend. So yes, you could have attended many debutante balls. Afternoon tea with dancing. This type of event, while structured similarly to a ball, it was treated in a more informal atmosphere. In the 20s and 30s, you would see formal dresses. However, by the 50s and on, you started seeing day dresses pop up. These events, while still large, were definitely smaller than a ball. During these types of events, they could serve buffet style or casual finger food, small dance. This would be even smaller of an event and typically only for younger crowds and close friends. And lastly, small tea, a low-key event without music and a more intimate atmosphere. While these debutantes events were meant to showcase the best of the best, they also excluded many groups. In response, Black communities created their own debutante balls, which, though similar in appearance, often had different aims. These events celebrated achievements beyond marriage, highlighting academic excellence, professional accomplishments, and contributions to their community, which I believe is a lot more powerful and important, as opposed to just finding a husband. For example, the Links Incorporated, founded in 1946 by a group of Black women. Their ultimate goal was to enhance the life of Black communities. One of their biggest events is hosting a debutante ball across the USA. Leading up to the event, the Debs would undergo months of training with social etiquette and public speaking, much like a finishing school, but they also did community service projects. Here are a few famous examples of Debs from the 20th century. Barbara Hutton. Her retail tycoon grandfather, Frank Woolworth, was the founder of F.W. Woolworths, where they sold toys, clothes, and operated their lunch counter, where the famous racial segregation sit-ins took place in North Carolina during the 60s. Barbara Hutton was born November 14, 1912 in New York City, and 18 years later she debuted on her birthday in 1930. The ball was controversial, to say the least, as the Great Depression had been raging on for a little over a year, and the cost of this Debs ball was enormous. $60,000 had been spent to make this night one of a kind. In 2025, $60,000 is worth well over $1 million, when at the time most balls were around $16,000. Which is still quite expensive at just a little over $300K. Caroline and Jacqueline Bouvier. Caroline, otherwise known as Lee, was born in 1933, and her sister, otherwise known as Jackie Kennedy, born in 1929. Both had the same parents, a stockbroker and a socialite. They debuted in 1950, which would have put Lee around the ages of 17 to 18 and Jackie 21 years old. Their debut was even publicized in the 1950 December issue of Life magazine on page 71. But the focus was more on Lee than her sister Jackie, who we all know would later marry President John F. Kennedy. You might not know their first names, but you definitely will know their last name. Rosemary and Kathleen Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy's sisters. Both of them debuted in 1938 to King George IV and Queen Elizabeth. Rosemary was just 20 years old, wearing a white tulle floor-length gown with a glittering beading and a white headpiece. Kathleen was 18 years old, wearing a white tulle gown with flower appliques and the same headpiece as her sister. While both girls were beaming with youthfulness, both would go on to have very different lives. Just 3 years after this, Rosemary was forced to undergo a lobotomy, forever changing her as a person. She would spend the rest of her life in mental institutions, causing her to relearn how to walk, but her speaking abilities never quite came back. As for her sister, Kathleen, despite her mother's wishes, she would marry William Cavendish. Just a few months later, she would be left a widow after he died fighting in World War II. A few years after that, she would later die in a plane crash. Did you ever attend a debutante ball? Was your experience anything like this? Let me know in the comments below. Also, make sure to check out the description box, as I provide interesting articles and books I use to help complete this video. As always, my name is Hannah Truly Elisha, and thanks for learning with me.